What's up, everybody? It's Locked On Vikings coming to you from the Super Bowl today. We're going to talk to Matt Birk a little later in the show, but it's also Tuesday, Twitter Tuesday, getting your questions here on the Locked On Vikings podcast.
Ooh-wee! You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I am your host, your pal, and the kid you copied off in math class. My name is Luke Braun. You can find me on Twitter at Luke Braun NFL. Show is on Twitter at Locked On Vikings, and today's episode is brought to you by Get Upside. Just download the free Get Upside app and use promo code Touchdown to get 25 cents per gallon or more cash back on your first tank. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. And as you might notice, it sounds a little bit different because today we are at Radio Row at the Super Bowl. Earlier today, I talked to Matt Birk a little bit about his time in Minnesota, about run games and stuff. I'm going to share that conversation with you. I'm really excited to do that, but it's also Twitter Tuesday, so I'm going to get to as many of your mailbag questions as I possibly can in the meantime, and that is where we are going to start. So, the first one that I'm going to take, by the way, if you have any questions for me, you can always send them to me at Luke Braun NFL on Twitter, at Locked On Vikings on Twitter, LockedOnVikingsPodcast@gmail.com. If you want to send an email, there's usually a Google form in the show notes as well. If you got anything longer for me, rather do that. But there's been some really interesting news. So I'm going to start with a question from Englenuts, who asks, do you think that hiring a Super Bowl coach has its disadvantages in the quality of staff that he can hire because he can't officially be hired until after? Do you think he already has guys tabbed for spots? So he asked this question before a whole bunch of Vikings news came out. So that kind of answers it for you, because the Vikings have already requested some interviews. They requested an interview for DC is what it seems like they're really looking at so far. Aubrey Pleasant, the D-backs coach for the Lions. I want to look further into him. I'm kind of a fan. Wink Martindale, who's a legendary name, who left the Ravens kind of mutually there. And there's some other names around. They took a running backs coach, there is a running backs coach in Denver who is currently leaning toward becoming the run game coordinator for the Vikings. The Vikings need a run game coordinator because Kevin O'Connell is a pass game passing guy, so they need a guy to, I think, do the run game. And so I would really like somebody in that hire. I don't know anything about this Broncos guy. I'll get back around to it, though, with a little bit more research for you. The answer to that is, so here's the deal. Kevin O'Connell cannot really participate in this right now. He has something more important to focus on. So he'll come back around in a week, and I guess that means they probably can't finalize any decisions. However, Kevin O'Connell is plenty allowed to text some friends and say, hey, kind of thinking about I'm going to need an OC. Are you interested in the job? Let's talk about it. There's nothing really against that, but it's a matter more of how much of the staffing are you going to do without the head coach in the room, and like how much work of that. So it's more of a logistical issue. There's no rule against this or anything like that. But sure, I guess there might be a worry that like the guy you really, really want totally got poached by another team or whatever. But honestly, you could text a guy. Let's say he's the guy you want. Please be my OC. I really want you. You're my favorite. And if that guy goes and takes another job and doesn't want to wait for you, he probably wasn't going to take your job over that job anyways. And like the situation where this bites you is a situation where like he was going to take your job, but he was too worried about losing the other job. So he took that just to be safe. So he made sure he got a job, and then you lost out on. And it's like such a specific scenario. I don't think it's something really much to worry about. For me, I'm probably going to wait until they hire actual guys, and then I'll evaluate who they hired. And I don't think they had to wait till after the Super Bowl is like a valid excuse if the hire sucks. So with that in mind, I can evaluate it more earnestly. The next one I'm going to take comes from JV Swaps, who asks, what's the coolest number for a quarterback to wear? My opinion is 1. It's got to be 1. And I'm not just saying that because Bo Brock of Locked On Cardinals is right here. So 1 rules. Somebody said 7. That's objectively wrong. 7 is the Christian Ponder number, and that's terrible. I think if you are a pocket passer and you're tall, you have to wear a number over 15. I think those are the rules. And I don't know. 7 can look cool on college teams, but I'm not a big. I'm partial to 4. I'm partial to 3. I'm bigger on single-digit numbers. But I think, I don't know, very hard to beat the aesthetic of a quarterback wearing number 1. That's always going to look pretty cool. The next one I'm going to answer comes from Danny Casual, who asks, the Vikings were big proponents of spark scores under Spielman, right? Do we think that could change with a new GM in place, or is that pretty much common approach across the league? Yeah, so I think every team just about has some level of like athleticism index in their draft process, even if it's not like analytically driven, but I think most of them are by this point. But even still, you're going to have scouts that are saying, yeah, his 40 time was good and his broad jump was good or whatever. Like everybody's incorporating these numbers, right? In some way. The Vikings had, I don't think it was Spark specifically, but it was a Spark-like index where they would take athletic data. Spielman just told us this one of those interviews. They would just take athletic data and they would kind of composite it all into some kind of index, and they would really, really value that index. They were really big into athleticism. My guess is that Kwesi has his own version of that index, but will probably have plenty of value on athleticism. But I don't know. The analytics on whether or not athleticism is important are kind of hotly debated. So I actually don't know where Kwesi's going to land on like how much he values that, but they're going to have their own index and they're going to use it as much as they think is appropriate. Minnesota Sports Now asks, if Rodgers leaves, doesn't that give us the best chance to win the division if Kirk stays on the team? I understand moving on from Kirk eventually, but when there's a solid window of opportunity, we should take advantage of that. So two answers to this. One, maybe, but Justin Fields is going into year 2. That might be a bit of a barrier. And 2, winning the division doesn't mean anything if you aren't a good enough team to win the playoffs. Like, look, the NFC North might be one of those divisions where a 9-win team wins the division and gets a home playoff game. But where's that team going? And so that's why I say, like, I don't want to be a division. You need to build a contender, and a contender should naturally win the division. But I think we should, I don't know, aim a little higher than that. But again, there are some people that will say, yeah, and Kirk Cousins does make you a contender with the right coaching and protection and blah, 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 blah. And if that's the case and that's what you're going for, I'm much more sympathetic to that. But I don't think just the division is weak, why don't you be good, not great now, is aiming high enough. Kurt with 2 C's asks, if we're still going to be wide zone, what are the chances we continue to draft little baby men for the offensive line? So probably low. So the way I understand Kevin O'Connell, I might ask Locked On Rams about this later in the week too, but the way I understand Kevin O'Connell is he actually likes varied run schemes. He likes zone, but he also likes running power and duo and gap schemes and, counters and all sorts of crazy stuff. They like to mix it up and then, depending on the opponent for the week, deploy whatever run game they think. So they want to have everything installed and then say, oh, this team's really bad at defending power. We're going to be a power team this week. And then next week we'll be a zone team. That's, I guess, his ideal state. So I guess I'm probably going to go for more versatility on offensive line. And I'm not talking necessarily position versatility, though that's always a plus. I'm talking a guy, this guy can fit in both a zone and a power scheme. And, he can down block and he can reach block. So, jack of all trades type lineman, which if you're not going for the elite of the elite means you're probably going to get jack of all trades, master of none. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's a fine archetype. I have a whole bunch more questions to get to. I'm definitely not going to get to all of them, but first let me talk to you about Grambling. BetOnline is your one-stop shop for a good old Gramble. On the Locked On NFL podcast, I actually talked to Dave Mason, who is one of the people who sets the books at BetOnline. Asked him about a bunch of prop bets. Go check that out. But you can bet on the Super Bowl props, the silly stuff, the fun stuff. How Cooper Kupp over under to what color will Eminem's hair be, and what song will he play first at the halftime show. All sorts of fun stuff. So go check that out. You can bet on football, basketball, baseball, whatever else you like. You can do that at betonline.net. Enter promo code LOCKEDON. You can get a 50% welcome bonus as well. That is betonline.net, where the game starts. I also want to talk to you about my new favorite app. It is Get Upside. Buying gas sucks. It's not fun, and the prices are going up. So why don't we cut a little bit off of the top of that with Get Upside? It's an app you can get at the Google Play or App Store. Just download it. It'll show you which gas stations nearby are participating. Go fill up at one of those, take a picture of your receipt if they ask, and then they can just knock a little bit off the top. Enter promo code touchdown when you sign up. You can get 25 cents or more on your first fill up. 25 cents or more on your first fill up with the Get Upside app. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. Of course, we are here at Super Week, but it's not just me on Locked On Vikings. Of course, we got Locked On Rams here, Locked On Bengals, Locked On Today, Locked On Now. We got everybody here at the Super Bowl doing interviews and stuff, and I even got one coming up later in the show with Matt Birk, so make sure you stick around for that. Let's continue on with, I got a long one here from Kyle Slaby, who asks, acknowledging that 3-4, 4-3 base defenses as a concept isn't clear-cut in the NFL, which is true, by the way, don't let that distinction trick you. Which current Vikings defenders would fit best in a 3-4 defense, and is there enough building block players to dictate any scheme change? So here's the deal. With the Vikings, they ran a varied front last year. They were a 4-3 team under Zimmer for years and years and years. Last year, they transitioned and stole concepts from Patrick Graham, which I think is part of why he ended up going so deep into the head coaching thing. They stole a lot from Patrick Graham, and I guess to a greater degree, Vic Fangio, and those defenses, which are 3-4 defenses. But if you looked at what Patrick Graham has done in New York with the Giants, and this is a huge part of why I liked him as a head coach, is because I loved this. But a lot of bear fronts, which means 3 defensive tackles inside the offensive tackles. So, like, you're loading up the middle. And also, that means kind of flattening out the front. So you have 5 people up on the line of scrimmage and only 1 linebacker off the ball, or, 6-1 or 6-2 or something like that. Those sorts of fronts, the Vikings actually employed that quite a bit, and that really seamlessly transitioned into the Zimmer blitzes that want to have 7-8 guys on the line of scrimmage and you don't know who's coming. So with all that in mind, they are kind of halfway to it already, and depending on who they get for defensive coordinator, they could kind of go either way. And so which players fit it best? A lot of these players fit both equally, I guess. Like Dalvin Tomlinson could be a 4-eye in a 3-4, which means he lines up kind of on the inside shoulder of the tackle, or he could be a 3-tech in a 4-3, which means he lines up between the tackle and guard. You're moving the guy like 2 inches over. You could also see Michael Pierce could be a 4-3 nose tackle, and I think he's got plenty of destructive power to be like a head-up, zero technique, big boy in the middle type nose. If he can, stay healthy and stay on the field. So I think your front is sort of built. I think Eric Kendricks could work in both. Danielle Hunter is obviously scheme agnostic. There is no scheme that doesn't have a use for a giant like hyena that's also a Captain America. I think they have a fairly versatile personnel, but they also have a very incomplete personnel. They kind of have nobody in the secondary. So I don't know. They don't really have any corners. They're missing a linebacker. They need another edge rusher. They need a safety. So the guys they have are pretty versatile, but whatever they end up building, they're missing like 6 or 7 starters on the defense. So that's kind of scary there. And so whatever they build, they will have the flexibility to build it, but that's not necessarily a good thing because it means they haven't built anything. Waka Waka asks, can we get anything from the Super Bowl that would be an indication of O'Connell's performance, or is the performance of the Rams offense irrelevant? So I was having an interesting time. I was watching some Rams tape trying to get used to Kevin O'Connell and learn about him. And it's weird because the delineation of, or distribution of responsibility that I understand is Kevin O'Connell comes up with the game plan, he writes the menu, and Sean McVay calls the plays. He picks from the menu and he sequences them and he kind of creates the structure. And then, of course, he oversees the process entirely. He still owns the menu, but he delegates that to Kevin O'Connell. And so what I get is, whenever you see a play, understand that Kevin O'Connell probably said, I like this play against the Bengals. And that's what you see again. Like that's so if they get a play that totally, snipes the Bengals and catches them blitzing or something like that, you say, okay, Kevin O'Connell said he liked that play against the Bengals, but Sean McVay was the one that decided, we're running this on a 2nd and 7. And of course, there's going to be more, it's a blurrier line than that, right? Because they'll say, hey, I love this on 3rd downs, or I love this in the red zone. Like that's the structure of a game plan, and Kevin O'Connell would still be categorizing things like that. But the actual decision to do it and sequencing it, and the decision to sequence this play after he's called a play that sets it up, that kind of stuff is still McVay. So you can glean something, but you have to be really careful as to what part of the, what made that successful? Was it that it was really well sequenced with plays before it? That's McVay. Or was it, oh my God, that design was awesome? That's O'Connell. So you can definitely get something, but you got to be careful. Chris asks, if Tom Brady wanted to be the offensive coordinator, would you be interested? Probably. I guess. I don't know. I don't think he's going to go into coaching, though. I think he's going to go into media. But I guess, I don't know. It's weird with former quarterbacks most of these, we saw this with Josh McCown and the Texans, where they wanted to hire him as head coach, but like, dude's got to be a position coach for like a hot second first. Even the greatest of greatests still probably have to climb up the ladder a little bit. So I'd be a little wary of that, but also he's like the greatest to ever do it. So I think he could probably just waltz into any building and get whatever job he wants if he wanted to. I don't know. He's a weird figure. Let's do a couple more. Aaron R. asks, what are the chances the Vikings try to extend Kirk with Kevin O'Connell and reach for the future franchise quarterback in the 2023 draft, and then allow them a couple years to learn under Kirk? It's a proven successful strategy, and I'm here for it. Kirk is a smart player to a fault most of the time. So I guess the only issue I have with this plan is the timeline, because you've got a year of Kirk Cousins, and then you draft in 2023. That's another year of Kirk Cousins, and then you're developing that guy for 2 years. So that's a third year of Kirk Cousins. So you're basically, by that time, everybody who we love on the roster is expensive or old. Danielle Hunter will be pushing 30. Dalvin Cook will be old. Justin Jefferson will probably be on a gigantic contract, so you're going to have more cap issues. It's going to be really difficult to keep the cap, and it's going to be difficult to keep all those players in. So for this to work, you have to draft really, really well outside of the quarterback that you like. And of course, you got to hope that guy works out. If he doesn't work out, you're screwed, but that's going to be the case with any plan. So it's not really a differentiating factor. I think it's just too slow. But I will say, if you want to do the bridge if you want to draft a quarterback in 2023, I think that guy's got to be starting in 2023. And then if it takes him some time to figure out things and you're kind of building to something, I can be a little bit more willing to be patient, but I don't want to wait 3 years before my quarterback gets his first snap. That's too long to wait. Give me 1 year and then that guy's going to start getting his experience. But it's just too long to wait. I think that's just too slow of a timeline. I think I got time for one more. I'm going to do this just because Bo Brock's sitting next to me. Murray unfollowed the Cardinals on his social media. Anyway, you think we can swing Kirk and a pick for Kyler? Bo, what do you think?
No.
I don't know if he said no emphatically, so we're going to go with that. All right, that's going to be it for the mailbag here, but I do have this thing for with Matt Birk I want to share with you. I asked him stuff about like running behind Adrian, or running with blocking in front of Adrian Peterson. Asked him a whole bunch of interesting stuff. Can't wait to share that conversation. So stick around for that. Get excited. But first, let me talk to you about your car. It's really important to make sure that you are taking care of your car, and that means you got to get the right price. The right parts, the right oil, and especially if you're a do-it-yourself or you're trying to save some money, maybe change your own oil or something, go no further than rockauto.com. They have a sick catalog where you can enter your make, your year, and your model. You can get whatever parts you want delivered directly to your door. And then whether you're doing it yourself or you're bringing that to a mechanic, and that means you only have to pay the mechanic for labor. They're not going to upcharge you for the parts. You can do just that, delivered right to your door. Super easy. You can save like 30, 50, 100% like savings on this stuff. Like you can cut this thing in half if you shop right on rockauto.com. So head on over to rockauto.com. They're a family website. They've been doing this for 15 years. They know exactly what they're doing. Head on over there. And in the How You Heard About Us section, make sure you let them know that Locked On sent you. Because if you don't, the Rabbits might do something that gets this entire event shut down, and we do not want that. Head on over to rockauto.com. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. We're talking here with Matt Birk, Super Bowl 47 champion, former Viking, former Raven. I'm going to be a little biased now and talk to you about your time with the Minnesota Vikings. Remind me the exact years that you were there before you went to Baltimore.
98 through 08.
98 through 08. Okay, so you had been through a couple of infamous Vikings moments, some deep playoff runs, though. So I guess the playoffs are always so different. So one of the things I was really looking forward to asking you is take me inside the mentality. I mean, look, you're preparing for a regular season game is one thing, and preparing for a playoff game, an NFC championship game, that's a totally different thing. Tell me how that vibe changes and how you maybe got used to that over the years.
Well, I think everything just gets kind of ratcheted up a notch because the playoffs, it's final. You know, if you lose, it's over, and we all know that feeling when all of a sudden the season's just over. So you have to know that in the playoffs, I think that the teams that I was on that were successful, that made a deep run, or the one that won the Super Bowl, is you actually make it more simple than you do during the regular season. You make sure that everybody knows exactly what we're doing every single play. And that means it's bread and butter. It's your identity. And that's why, where the regular season's important, it's not just important to win games and do this, but you really have to find out who you are as a football team. So then come the playoffs, you know exactly what you have, and you need to just call your best plays, line up your best guys, and just see if your best is better than their best. Because the stage is bigger and the stakes are higher and all that, you almost have to dumb it down a little bit or make it even simpler, which is, I think, a little bit counterintuitive for what some coaches and players think you have to do in the playoffs, which is, find some secret play or, do some secret pregame routine. No, that is not the time for that stuff. It's the time to be exactly who you are.
It's interesting. A while back, I talked to Chuck Foreman on Locked On Vikings, and I asked him about, okay, so what went wrong, man? You were in all those Super Bowls. What do you blame? And he said the exact same thing. So we tried to be somebody we weren't, and that's why that all fell apart. So I guess I want to reminisce with you a little bit about all of those old days. You had some absolutely awesome Vikings running backs run behind you. You blocked for Adrian Peterson, for Robert Smith, Chester Taylor, no slouch. Who was your favorite guy of all of those? Who's your favorite guy to block for?
Well, I would have to say Adrian Peterson because
I figured.
I had him when he was young, and he'd always just had this big smile ear to ear. He was just like a golden retriever. He just wanted to run. He was just happy running, and he was so funny because it was maddening sometimes. He would miss holes, a lot. And you'd be like, Adrian, the hole's right where it's supposed to be. Where are you going? Be, I saw something. And, you wouldn't overcoach him because then sometimes if he'd have gone where he was supposed to go, it would have been a disaster. But he did something else, and it was a 70-yard touchdown run. You know? But it was just to watch him, how hard he ran all the time. He didn't just make me better because he made me look better, but he made me better because this guy, he had a level of intensity that I don't know if I've ever seen anybody that could match that. And so he just by his example, he made everybody, I think, play a little bbit harder. And he was just a warrior. And obviously, once in a decade talent. It was those were a fun 2 years with him.
Yeah, that sounds like a really good time. Okay, you said something really interesting I want to drive in on because there's so much run game doesn't matter, running backs don't matter, all this stuff. But you said running backs make the O-line look better. And I believe that wholeheartedly, and I would love to hear more about what that means. And don't be afraid to go into the weeds a little bit about like technique or blocks or whatever. But what does that mean what does it look like when a running back does something that makes the O-line look better?
Well, I think, you're not going to block it perfectly every time. And so I think a great running back, and what's probably most underestimated in that position, is when it's not there for a running back, just put your head down, get forward, and take the no gain or -1 versus a -6 or 7. We always say like the O-line's responsible for the first 5 yards. After that, it's either wide receivers blocking or running backs just using their natural talent. Now, if a guy busts a 75-yard run during a game, chances are he's going to end up with a $150 or so, and they're going to say, "Wow, the O-line blocked really well." But
Perfect.
That's really not the case. But I think for not every play, even though it's drawn up in the playbook where you're supposed to hit your head on the goalpost, that's not how it is. And so if you're running an inside zone play, sometimes 4 yards is all there is, or 2 yards is all there is. And so good running backs, I think, understand that and aren't trying to hit home runs every time they get the ball, because when you do that, those and particularly this is young guys who in college it's a different game and they're used to outrunning people and making guys miss. That doesn't happen a lot in the NFL, and so it's taking what's there. Sometimes you're going to call a bad play, it's into a bad look. You just take your medicine, get the ball, get up in there, get what you can get. And live to fight another day. And I think good running backs understand that sometimes 3 yards is the best you can do on a play. Make sure you end the play with the ball, hand it to the referee, and let's line up again. Yeah,
it makes sense, and it's a kind of a war of attrition thing. Okay, one more Vikings question, and then we'll talk a little bit about the Ravens too, which will be on Locked On Ravens if it's just Vikings fans listening to this. I have to, because you are a former Viking, I'm obligated by the cosmos to ask for your Kirk Cousins opinion. Vikings have a big old decision with the quarterback. Big contract. Do you extend him? Do you trade him? What do you do? You are Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. You're in charge of the Vikings. You get carte blanche to do whatever you want with Kirk Cousins. What's your plan?
Well, listen, you can do a lot worse than Kirk Cousins at quarterback in the NFL. I mean, I think Kirk has, at times he has shown that he is as capable as anyone. And the one thing that Kirk has not had in his time in Minnesota, I think, is for a majority of the season above average offensive line play. I think it's been average to slightly below average. And he's not a guy. He's not a guy that's going to run around and, make plays.
Do the Joe Burrow thing, yeah.
Right. No, he's not that guy. So I'd say Vikings fans, let's stop yelling at Kirk Cousins for just being himself, right? This is what we have. I said earlier this year, and I got killed for it before the season started. I said Kirk Cousins is as effective as Tom Brady right now, because you saw when
Why do you think you got yelled at for that, Matt?
But
what do you think happened there?
Right now, when the pocket is good, Tom Brady's great. Kirk Cousins is great. They both get into trouble when the pocket breaks down, because that's not who they are. I know you can't have all-stars at every position. The Vikings have great weapons, okay? If they can figure out a way to shore up that offensive line where Kirk feels comfortable, he's got to feel comfortable where, hey, most of the time I know I'm going to be there. There's been games where he's been running for his life the entire game, and no quarterback's going to really thrive unless you're Patrick Mahomes or Aaron Rodgers. You can do it, but other than that, I think what's really lacking is just his confidence. I mean, really, he's going to say all the right things, but knowing that the guys up front most of the time are going to give him good protection. I think if you get that, you'll see Kirk Cousins, go to another plateau. And everybody always likes to point out his record on primetime games and this and that. Listen, everybody's got the label. He can't win the big game until he wins the big game. So that's fine. The only person that's never had that stigma is Tom Brady, because he won it his first year. Everybody else goes and fails. Peyton Manning for years and years and years.
For years, yeah.
Couldn't get over the hump. And then once he does, it's like, oh yeah, he's one of the greatest of all time. So, I don't worry about that stigma. I don't worry about Kirk's mentality. He is who he is. You have to understand that, and you have to put, the right pieces around him. I also think that as far as and this is just a total outsider's view, from a personality, leadership qualities, Kirk's his own man. I don't think he's the guy huddle grabbing guys by the face mask. I don't think anybody on that offense is, and I think that's what it's missing. Is kind of that one guy who can maybe be a little bit nasty, maybe get in guys' faces a little bit and tell them that they gotta pick their stuff up. A little bit more of an edge to that Vikings offense. So when things are going bad, they can stop the downward spiral and pull themselves up and play like they're capable of playing. But too often you just kind of see it. They don't start off well, and then it never gets any better. Thank y'all
so much for taking a little bit of time to make Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day every single day. We'll be back tomorrow with more cool stuff from Super Week, so I'm really hoping that I can give you some really cool stuff from here. In the meantime, check out the Locked On Bets podcast with your boy Q, handicapping expert Lee Sterling. They are going to help you get your grambles straight. I will see you all tomorrow, and as always, Skol.